Hey guys, so I'm back. Due to popular demands, I thought it'd be nice to start creating some matchup guides. This one, episode one, is gonna be Victor versus Annie matchup guide. Um, so just a bit of disclaimer on my Annie experience. So I keep track of all the sets that I play. So here you'll see kind of my total experience in the Victor Annie matchup. I played a decent number of games. I can see recently it's been a little bit rough. I did play yesterday and did get a win. So, helped boost the confidence a little bit. I will say this matchup is slightly Annie favored, or at least I believe it is slightly Annie favored. Um, More than that, this matchup really is like coin flip favored. Whoever goes first, especially in games two and three, has like a really really big advantage. You can see that almost all my sets go to game three. Even the sets that I win, I go to game three. That's because the Arena's Greatest is just so strong that whoever starts it is like has a really good shot of winning. So make sure you do your best to win game one, because if you're going the Arena's Greatest, you have a pretty good shot of winning that game as well. So quickly talk about some key cards for Victor. So first of all, we're going to talk about Cult of Glory and Trifarian Glory Seeker. Trifarian Glory Seeker, like a little bit less so, but Cult of Glory is a really, really important card in this matchup. Um, this card you can use to dodge Gust. That one's really important. This one is also going to be important for trading into Kaisa. So one thing that's going to happen a lot is, they're going to accelerate Kaisa onto a battlefield and, get the draw, and then they'll pass a turn, and then it'll go over to you. They'll have two mana up, and what you're looking to do is bait out interaction. You're gonna try and run into it with 4 might worth of units to basically offer an even trade. When you offer an even trade, they are either gonna have to accept the trade or play some kind of interaction. So this piece of interaction is gonna look like Gust or Fight or Flight or like Gust on one of your units, Fight or Flight on one of your units, or Fight or Flight Kaisa. If they're Fight or Flighting Kaisa, you're pretty happy. You get to hold your Call to Glory in hand. If they're Fight or Flighting one of your units, you can Call to Glory the remaining unit and still trade into Kaisa. That's kind of the really big important part is, I'll get into this a little bit later, but baiting out interaction is really, really important for this matchup. Daring Poro is also a really, really important unit. Daring Poro gets to attack as a 3. None of Annie's units that Annie's happy to play gets to hold or defend as a 3. The main, culprits are Traveling Merchants, Pouty Poro, and Sneaky Deckhand. So what's going to happen, ideally, is you play Daring Poro turn 1, and they'll play like Sneaky Deckhand on their turn 1. Obviously, that's not like the ideal scenario. You don't want them to have Sneaky Deckhand, but Daring Poro is there to respect Sneaky Deckhand. Being able to play something on turn 1 that's able to challenge Sneaky Deckhand and basically threaten a very, very positive trade for you is definitely something that you want to do. Noxian Drummer is a really important card for this matchup. It does not get around Gust. I got that pointed out to me the other day. But it does get around Fight or Flight. Unless Fight or Flight is hidden. But most of the time, any players are not going to hide Fight or Flight. They don't really need to because they don't really want to pay the power cost on hiding Fight or Flight, and they're always going to have 2 mana up. So most of the time, Fight or Flight is going to be played at action speed, meaning that your recruit is guaranteed to be generated if they're responding with Fight or Flight. It's also really important that Noxian Drummer attacks as a 4. So this means that when you're attacking into Kaisa, you can threaten an even trade, like a 1-for-1 trade, that you're really happy to offer your opponent. It means that the way the bodies are distributed, 3 and 1, really baits the opponent to use some sort of interaction as well. So obviously Gust and Fight or Flight are the 2 main ones that come out, but Voidseeker as well for the Noxian Drummer body. If you're able to bait out this interaction, use Call to Glory to basically go from 4 to like getting the drummer removed in some way or another, going down to 1 with just the 1 recruit, and being able to Call to Glory on top of that to trade off Kaisa is something that you're actually really, really happy to do. So Noxian Drummer is a pretty key piece of this list, for purple matchups and for Annie. Noxian Drummer, if you're running into a battlefield and they're retreating off the battlefield, Noxian Drummer also holds as a 4, which is relevant. Kaisa doesn't really want to attack in unless she has cleave, which she's going to have cleave some amount of the time, but being able to just take cards out of their hand in one way is very useful. Singularity is really important. You don't have too many targets for Annie, but you don't really need to hit that many targets. Generally, it's going to be Kaisa and Darius are the 2 priority targets that you're going to be hitting. So if you're able to hit, and Annie, I guess, and Vi, but if you're able to hit one priority target like Kaisa or Darius, and then one other target, you're really, really happy. And if that includes Pouty Poro, like so be it. You're kind of happy to tank the power costs on the deflect. But ideally you're not going to be doing that. So kind of, best case scenario, you're hitting like Kaisa Darius as your 2 ticks, or it'll be like Darius Traveling Merchant, or like Kaisa Vi, something like that. Those types of trades you're really, really happy to do. It's like a clean 2-for-1. There's not a whole lot that Annie can do. The only real answer is if you're targeting Darius, for Annie to burn 2 cards in order to bring Darius up to a 7. If that happens, you're like not even that mad because they're wasting 2 cards. And these cards need to be at reaction speed, so there's not a whole lot of options for them to do. It could be something like Gust, a sneaky deckhand that's on the field. Like if you're targeting Darius and sneaky deckhand, it'll be like Gust and then Flash, and then they'll go to 7. And it's like at that point you're not even that mad. That's a pretty decent trade for you. Hidden Blade, Facebreaker, these guys are really, really important for dealing with Vi. Vi Ride the Wind is kind of the key finisher for Annie decks, and any deck that wants to be competitive into Annie needs to have some sort of way to deal with this. In your case, it's going to be Hidden Blade and Facebreaker as the main 2 options. Being able to hide it means that you don't have to hold mana up every single turn. Instead, you can hide it and just chill. And then just having so many copies of it is really, really important. Game 1, you're only going to have 3 copies in the 3 copies of Hidden Blade. But games 2 and 3, you can side in all the Facebreakers that are in your sideboard. I'm currently running 3. When I was playtesting yesterday and had 3, it felt really, really good. I drew 1. I drew 2 in my opening hand and mulliganed 1. And I was pretty happy because I just had the 1 in my hand. So that means you have 6 answers in your deck for Vi Ride the Wind, and you're only going to really have to deal with that combo like once and twice at most. So having so many copies is really nice to be able to kind of cycle through, dig for your answers, and stuff like that. Sprite Mother is really important. Sprite Mother is super, super sick in this deck. Being able to have a sprite that attacks as 3 basically gets to kick off all the 2s that Annie is going to be trying to hold with. If they're using cards to deal with Sprite, aka like Flash, Fight or Flight, or Gust, you're generally pretty happy. There are situations where the tempo loss is so bad that them dealing with the Sprite is kind of bad for you. But if you think about it, like there isn't an alternative to Sprite Mother that would fare better in that situation. Sprite Mother is kind of the best that you have. Imagine you're running like Sprite Call or something instead. The reason I cut Sprite Call from this deck is it took getting the Sprite gusted, like the Sprite from Sprite Call gusted once, to be like, I never want to deal with this ever again. Sprite Mother, if the Sprite from Sprite Mother is getting gusted, you at least have the 3 might body that you're going to be able to attack with next turn, which is kind of a pretty decent floor, like power floor for this. And the ceiling is really nice. Sprites are really, really good. Being able to hold as 3 means that it demands interaction if they want to attack into it, and if they're using a whole card to attack over the sprite, it's not too bad. And if they're not challenging the sprite at all, the battlefield is open for the taking for the following turn. So you're not even losing the point. Like sprites are not able to score from holding, but if sprites are expiring from their temporary trigger, that means that the battlefield is empty and you can just score it anyway. So you're not even like losing out on any points if sprites are expiring. The last big card I want to talk about is Valma's Lair. This card is in the deck just like 90% just for the Annie matchup. It has marginal use for the Kaisa matchup, and it's also really good into the other purple decks, aka Teemo and Yasuo. It'll depend on how much Teemo and Yasuo is being ran into your local scene, on how like relevant that is. But there's always gonna be Annies, and Vilma is super good for Annie, against Annie. Um, it helps to get around Flash as a really strong piece of interaction, and also stops fight or flight as a really important piece of interaction. Being able to shut down this type of interaction from one of their battlefields is really important. Ideally, you'd like to be able to get this on the Dreaming Tree game, so that their flashes are less relevant. Like Dreaming Tree is really, really strong because you can kind of hold both battlefields, and when one of them is threatened, you can flash both of them back, get the card back, and save all your units. But Annie runs Dreaming Tree on her going second game, so you can't really get that type of value out of them. You're always going to be running Arena's Greatest on your going first game because you kind of have to. There's not another game where it's safe to run Arena's Greatest, so you need to do it when you're going first, which means you can't really greed for that type of value. So Vilma's really good. Make sure you're trying to bait important units to go into Vilma's. So it'll be something like onto the battlefield that's not Vilma's, which is gonna be Zon Warren's. Or Zon Warren's or Arena's Greatest. You're gonna put the like lower value unit, like a recruit or like one of your 2-might units. And then onto the Vilma's lair you want to have more important units like drummer recruit or vanguard captain or sprite mother or something like that, so that it baits the more valuable units into Vilma's, so that they're not able to like utilize those units as well. Key cards for Annie. So I have Gust. The more copies of Gust they run, the harder the matchup's gonna be. If they have Gust in their opening hands, there's like a good chance you lose that game. Gust is really, really brutal for this matchup. It's basically like lightning bolt. You lose your entire turn one with Gust, essentially. Sneaky Deckhand is really important. Sneaky Deckhand is like the MVP of the Annie deck. If you're going first, Sneaky Deckhand gets to steal the first point of the game. And if you're going second, they can play a normal 2-drop on turn 1, and then double conquer turn 2 by running the 2-drop into 1 and Sneaky Deckhand into the other. This means that when you're going second, your battlefield is going to consist of like a 2 or 3 might unit and a recruit at best, which means the recruit is not going to be able to challenge the second battlefield. You can only use your 2 might or 3 might unit to contest one of the battlefields, which is going to be like the traveling merchant battlefield probably. This means that they're going to be at least 3 points. With the 2-drop plus Sneaky Deckhand, they're going to go to 2, and then you can remove 1. Like, you can move basically at most 1, unless their hand is really bad. And then they're going to hold on the other battlefield with Sneaky Deckhand. So that means that they're going to start off the game with 3 points, and you're going to be at 1 point. So it's basically going to start off as a pretty uphill battle, kind of from the start. Kaisa Darius basically means that you're not going to be able to hold any battlefields. It's really, really hard to hold against Kaisa Darius. Kaisa plus Cleave, like accelerated Kaisa plus Cleave or Darius plus Cleave basically means that you're not going to be able to hold any battlefields. If you're holding mana up or hiding cards, you can Hidden Blade or Facebreaker. That's like pretty decent, but you are worried about, I guess, like additional interaction. If you're Facebreakering against Kaisa Darius run in, and like if they expended Cleave to be able to do that, it's like pretty good. You do really want to have Singularity to be able to remove them, because next turn they're double conquering for sure. Ride the Wind's really strong in this matchup, obviously because of partially because of Vi Ride the Wind, also because you don't have really enough might to distribute amongst battlefields so that you could stop Ride the Wind from scoring additional points. If a battlefield's open and they have a unit on the other battlefields, and they're holding 2 mana up, which they're always going to be holding 2 mana up, they're threatening to Ride the Wind over for 1 additional point and then hold for another point, which means Ride the Wind threatens as 2 points. Because if you think about it, like you're threatening to run in to clear the 2 might, clear whatever unit is on the battlefield, which means if they didn't have Ride the Wind, they would lose control of that battlefield. They would lose the unit and lose control of the battlefield. Them being able to keep the unit, conquer on your turn, and then hold the following turn is a 2 point swing. Is a 2 point swing. So Ride the Wind is a very, very threatening card, and has a lot of use in the mid game. Any players are going to be able to use it as well because they have any stubborn to bring Ride the Wind back. So they can always use at least one Ride the Wind and still guarantee being able to use Vi Ride the Wind later into the game. Very, very difficult card to play around. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. Lastly, I have Hextech Ray and Falling Star. There's a little asterisk here because not all anti-decks run this. Basically, no anti-decks run Hextech Ray, but it's kind of worth a shout out because it's so strong. And then some anti-decks will run like one Falling Star in the main, or will run like 1 or 2 Falling Stars in the sideboard, depending on basically your local metagame. If your local metagame has like a lot of Viktor, they could reasonably put additional Falling Stars into their sideboard. But yeah, so those are the general key cards for Viktor and Annie in this matchup. Let's quickly look at like a typical Annie list. So this Annie list is, I believe I took it from the one that won the SCG Con 10K that happened in I think it was Orlando a few days ago. So units, they have 18 units. They have basically 3 ofs of Pariporo, Traveling Merchant, Vi, Sneaky Deckhand, Kaisa, and Darius. They run 3 Scrap Heaps, and then they run a bunch of spells. Cleave, Gust, Stack Deck, Fight or Flight, Flash, Rebuke, Ride the Wind, Void Seeker, and then their battlefields are going to be Arena's Greatest, Dreaming Tree, and Zon Warrens. This is a pretty typical list. And then their sideboard contains 2 Gusts, 1 Fight or Flight, 2 Rebukes, 1 Fading Memories, and 2 Dravens. This is a pretty standard list. There are a couple things I want to take note of. There's only 1 Gust main deck. This means that like game 1, you don't have to respect Gust as much. You definitely need to respect Gust way more games 2 and 3, but games 1 you can kind of disrespect it a little bit. They have 1 Rebuke. Rebuke almost does nothing in this matchup, which is really good. If they are playing it, it's kind of to like finish the game, which can suck. Otherwise, they're like not playing this card. They're running 2 Void Seekers. Void Seekers aren't like horrible in this matchup, but they're not great. They really don't want to be holding 3 mana up because it means that they had 1 unspent mana during their turn, and their cycle cost is like pretty significant for Annie. So Void Seeker, the main targets are gonna be things like your 3 might units. It's gonna be like Drummer, Vanguard Captain, and Sprite Mother are like the main targets for Void Seeker in this matchup. None of those are like particularly like, you're not particularly sad if they did that, because if you think about it, it's like never a 1-for-1 trade. Vanguard Captain got 2 extra bodies, Sprite Mother got this Sprite, and Noxian Drummer got the Recruit. So you're basically never sad. You're never down cards when you're getting Void Seekered. You're always pretty okay to get Void Seekered. There's 0 Hextech Rays in the main or the side. There's 0 Falling Stars in the main or the side, and there's 0 Noxus Hopefuls in the main or the side. This is good. Noxus Hopeful is not a card you want to deal with. And Falling Star is also not a card you want to deal with. Falling Star is like really, really brutal into you. Noxus Hopeful, 4s are like pretty hard for you to deal with. You can deal with a couple of them, but the more 4s that are on the field, the harder and harder the matchup gets. This is quickly go over the gameplay loop. As I kind of talked about at the beginning, the matchup is slightly anti-favored, but it's even more going first favored. I kind of pointed it out when I was showing you my history in the matchup. Basically, every game goes to game 3 because whoever goes first, games 2 and 3 are heavily favored. The way you want to play the Annie matchup is to offer even trades and force Annie to respond. The reason you're okay with offering even trades is because you have access to more cards, because you can treat recruits as a card. So if you're trading, say, 2 recruits for 1 Sneaky Deckhand, or 2 recruits for 1 Merchant, or 2 recruits for 1 Pouty Poro, it is a 2-for-1 trade. It's a 2 might for 2 might trade, but in reality, it's like a 1 card for 0 card trade because you didn't actually spend any cards on those recruits. You just spent a little bit of energy. Um, this means that your bodies are way more expendable than Annie's. Annie really needs to respect. Annie can't afford to take even trades. Annie doesn't have enough units to afford to take even trades. The reason for this is because Call the Weak is really strong. If you're removing the small units and calling the weak like Kaisa Darius, they're gonna lose the game. Uh, the second is because Singularity is so strong. Annie can't generate a ton of bodies in one turn. Generally, they'll take turns off to play units if they need to in like the mid game. They'll like spend an entire turn playing like Merchant Poro just to like dump their hand, put bodies on board. If they're spending so many resources on playing bodies, that means that they're slowing down their game a lot. This means removing bodies is super important. So if you are doing even trades of bodies, aka like 2 recruits for a 2 might unit, or Noxian Drummer plus recruit for Kaisa, it's really good for you. Next, bait out interaction. Leverage your higher might totals and mana to get favorable trades. The mana part is like might be a little like wonky to start off with, but Annies generally stabilize around like 5 or 6 mana as like a total rune pool because of how much they end up recycling. They recycle for Ride the Wind. They recycle for Void Seeker. They recycle for Darius, and they recycle for Kaisa. This means that they're actually recycling quite a decent amount, like especially into the later game. And our Viktor deck really wants to get to 7. So you do have a little bit more mana to leverage, but what you're really leveraging is your higher might totals. Especially when you're attacking and they're defending. They really don't have ways to deal with units that are higher might to them. It forces out a lot of interaction. So if you're able to force out interaction and slowly drain out their hands, you're really happy. The way... we'll talk about the main win conditions now, actually. So you have a few main win conditions in this matchup. First of all, having more than 2 units on board, or 2 or more units on board, and having their board clear before Annie reaches 5 points. If you're able to do this, you have a really good chance of winning the game. When Annie is not at 6 points, she doesn't threaten Vi Ride the Wind. She needs to spend time developing bodies to be able to score the 6th point. That means that your Singularities, your Call the Weeks, your defensive grand stratagems, stuff like that, are way stronger and actually pose like a legitimate threat. And you need to have units on board to be able to threaten this, or else if you're playing like empty board versus empty board, then the sneaky deckhand just destroys you. So your win condition needs to have units on board first, and then clearing Annie's board as well. Second win condition is get to 6 before Annie does. Annie cannot hold. Annie is basically incapable of holding. Her best ways of dealing with attacking units are Gust and Fight or Flight, just like push units away. The problem with that is that you are attacking with way more units. So individual pushback effects are not good enough to deal with your threats. If you are able to get to 6 points before Annie is able to get to 6 points, you are able to score to 8 without having to worry about Vi Ride the Wind, and you can just expend all your resources. Say you're at 8 mana, you can like Singularity Hidden Blade, and if you have 4 units, there's just there are no cards in Annie's hand that are going to be able to stop you from winning this game. The third win condition is make Annie run out of cards. This is not really possible in Game 1 because of Zon Warrens and Scrap Heap, but it is a viable win condition in Games 2 and 3, especially if Annie doesn't draw that well. If Annie has 0 cards in hand, Vi Ride the Wind is not something you need to worry about because that's 2 cards. So Annie only runs so many copies of interaction, and some interaction is better than like other interaction. Fight or Flight, like Gust is the one that destroys you, and if you're getting Fight or Flighted, you don't actually mind that much unless you're losing the game. So since Annie plays so like leans so heavily into tempo, if you can like run her dry of cards, she's not going to be able to interact with you since you have more value on board, you have more bodies, and you have more might. So she's not really going to be able to stop you from winning the game if she runs out of cards. She doesn't have like big card draw. She has like lots of cycle card draw, like Traveling Merchant and Zon Warrens, and like Dreaming Tree is cycle draw because you need to expend cards in order to draw cards. Um, this means that if Annie is like running out of cards, doesn't she doesn't have gas to keep going. She's never gonna like be up on cards. She's never gonna go from like 1 to 3 cards in hand. She's gonna go from 1 card to 1 card in hand. But like, or like at best, she's like playing Kaisa into Zon Warrens and going from like the 1 Kaisa in hand to 2 cards in hand. That's like the best that Annie can get. Yeah. So your another win condition is just run Annie out of cards. So for the early games, your turns 1 to 3. Daring Portal is your best turn 1 play if you're going first. This is because you need to respect Sneaky Deckhand. Sneaky Deckhand is so strong, and you're not too sad if they're not playing Sneaky Deckhand turn 1. Daring Portal is basically only bad if they're playing Vi turn 1, because their 2 might unit, like their other 2 drops that are not Vi are not going to be able to attack into Daring Poro because it defense is a 2. Their 2s are all Pouty Poro and Traveling Merchant, which can't attack through Daring Poro without having to expend cards. And if they're playing Vi turn 1 and you're playing Daring Poro, like you're not even that sad anyways. They're recycling a whole rune on turn 1. They're probably going to run out of steam faster than you're going to run out of steam, even though they're getting a favorable trade into your Daring Poro. Your best turn 1 going second play is Noxian Drummer or Daring Poro Recruit. Noxian Drummer because they only run 1 Gust main board on game 1, meaning that Noxian Drummer's like the worst case scenario is she gets like fighter flighted, and that is like completely okay, completely okay, because you're not losing value. You're just losing tempo, and turns 1 to 3 you can afford to lose like a little bit of tempo. If you're going down like 2 points in the early game, it's like not the worst thing in the world. So there's this quote. I don't know where it originates from, but the quote is basically make them have it. Force them to have it. Viktor plays face up, and there are some like pros and cons to playing face up. I will like discuss this a little bit more at like a later date, but basically you can't always respect the options that they have because there are going to be times when they don't have it. If they do have it, you're sad. You're really sad. But some of the times they're not going to have it, and you can just run them over. This is going to be things like, you're playing Daring Poro turn 1, they play Sneaky Deckhand, you run the Daring Poro into them. If they have Gust, they have Gust. You can't run Daring Poro into the other battlefield. You can't afford to allow them to keep value. You need to force them to lose as many cards as you possibly can. Which means, if they're flashing Sneaky Deckhand away, that's, -1 flash. If they're fighter flighting your Daring Poro away, that's like -1 fighter flight. If they're gusting, it's the only gust that they're going to have access to. So you need to force them to have it. Even trades are good for you. Even might trades are favorable for you. If you're running your Noxian Drummer into their Kaisa, it forces them to use a card because they cannot afford to lose Kaisa as much as you can afford to lose Drummer. You can afford to lose your units. You can afford to take slightly negative trades or even trades because you have way more cards than them, because you have infinite recruits. So it is okay for you to take even trades. You'll find that once you start being okay with offering even trades, your games against Annie are going to go up way more. The reason I say run like even trades is because you risk getting blown out if you do like positive trades. So say you're running like Vanguard Captain plus Daring Poro into a Kaisa. So that's 6 might total. You're only losing 1 unit if that trade goes through, which is like an even trade. The problem is if one of them gets gusted, or one of them gets fighter flighted, or one of them gets void seekered, you're losing like a whole 3 might unit. if you're offering just an even trade of like a 3 might unit plus a recruit, then if the 3 might unit gets removed, you're only losing 1 recruit, which is like okay because you can still leverage the other 3 might unit that you retains basically. So offering even trades, generally speaking, are going to be more are less risky for you because there's less upside for you as well. Last thing is you want to run 3 might units into Trevelyan War Camp when you can. This is basically just to get around Gust. So your 3 might units are Vanguard Captain, Noxian Drummer, and sprites, like Sprite Mother and Sprite itself. And Daring Portal when a unit is on it. Some Annies will misplay and run Sneaky Deckhand into Trevelyan War Camp. If they do that, there's almost no answer except for Fight or Flight if you run into it turn 2. Because you don't get assault triggers if you're running into an open battlefield. So if you're running into Trevelyan War Camp as an open battlefield with Daring Poro, it can still get gusted. So that is something to, keep in mind. But you do want to play around Gust, especially games 2 and 3 when you can. Mid games, this is like turns 4 and 5. Okay, there's not very much mid game. This matchup is so fast. This matchup is so fast. So realistically, mid game is turn 4 and 5. Mid game is like until someone reaches 6 points, which is really, really, really fast in this matchup. Number 1, try to bait out as many cards as possible. Annie cannot hold battlefields. The best she can do is run away or push you away. You have to offer even trades and hold interaction until after their response. So I listed some examples using Noxian Drummer because she's the one that forces interaction out the most. The reason is Noxian Drummer and Cult Glory are like your key anti-Annie, or like our key anti-Annie cards. So the best examples utilize those because they're the ones that take advantage of Annie's interaction the most. So if you run Noxian Drummer into Kaisa, you're offering an even trade. You're offering a 4 for 4. If they're Fight or Fight or Flash Kaisa away, you can then use Call the Weak or Singularity on Kaisa. You want to bait out the Fight or Flight or Flash first, because if you take the even trade, you're happy. Annie knows this, which means they want to avoid these even trades. This means that if they're Fight or Flight or Flash Kaisa away, then you use removal and they're down a card. If they Fight or Flight Drummer away, you can Call to Glory the Recruit and still do an even trade, like a 4 might for 4 might. You get to keep your Drummer. If you did something like run a Recruit, hold priority, and play Call to Glory on top, they can Fight or Flight the Recruit back, and you lose out on the value. So you don't want to proactively use your interaction. You want to offer even trades. You go like 4 into 4, pass priority, and once they respond, that's when you play your interaction. Because you can afford to take even trades, they cannot afford to take even trades. If they gust your Drummer, you can Call to Glory the Drummer to make her go to 6, or you don't really need to do the or in that scenario. Call to Glory the Drummer, they'll trade off the Recruit, and then the Drummer will live, Kaisa will die. Second big point is try to keep up with Annie in points. If you can hit 6 before her, then you will win. So you want to play for tempo if you can. You really want to leverage things like Sprite Mother, Call the Weak, and Hidden Blade on priority targets to score points. Hidden Blade on targets does suck, but if you think it'll score you more points in the short to medium term, it is important to do. This will be something like if you're holding 2 recruits in base, you're holding 1 battlefield, and the other battlefield's empty, and she's at 5 mana. She accelerates Kaisa into your units. You would want to Hidden Blade her in that scenario because you'll get the point for holding, and then you'll be able to conquer the other battlefields. And if you were to not Hidden Blade her, you would lose control of that battlefield. It would she would get the point, you would not get the hold point, and you wouldn't be able to conquer the next turn. So sometimes in the middle game, if you have to, you will need to Hidden Blade priority targets like Darius and Kaisa in order to maintain your tempo and maintain a point lead. This is especially important when you're going first, because you don't want to allow her to swing the tempo and get a bunch of value from taking positive trades. In the end game, you want to keep her board as clean as possible. This is you leverage your efficient removal. You want to force out Ride the Wind when you're contesting. You want to force out their Ride the Wind so that they need to expend resources getting it back or drawing into another one. You don't want her to be holding multiple Ride the Winds when Ride the Wind is coming out. If she has one unit, obviously Call the Week is best. You should be willing to Call the Week Traveling Merchant or Deckhand or Vi or Pouty Pour or anything like that. You are willing to take the slightly suboptimal trade because you're recycling a rune and they're not, because they don't run enough units to capitalize on you using your removal on slightly less optimal targets. If she has 2 or more units, Singularity is really good. Like you can absolutely like wipe the floor with Annie's boards. If you're like at 8 mana, you Singularity, Call the Week, kill 3 units. You're super happy with that type of trade. You want to hold your Facebreakers and Hidden Blade for Vi Ride the Wind. In the later games, you're going to have a little bit more mana than you're going to be able to expend. So, later turns when you've kind of used some of your cards in hand, you're going to be able to end your turn with some amount of mana up, like 2 to 4, 5 mana up. This means that you can hold Hidden Blades and hold Facebreakers in your hand as well as hide them. This means that lots of Annie players will play as if the hidden card is Hidden Blade or Facebreaker and play around that, but they will almost never be planning around or even be at the liberty to play around multiple Facebreakers or Hidden Blades. I kind of talked about this a little bit in the matchup video. Like, good Annie players will know that they can do something like Vi, Ride the Wind, bait out Facebreaker / Hidden Blade, play Flash to dodge it, and then run back in. They will usually not have the liberty to play around multiple Facebreakers or Hidden Blades because they just don't have enough cards in their hand to be able to do that. You want to try to have some number of units in your base to be able to reconquer, especially if you're at 6 points. If you're at 7, you can attempt to hold, but if you are holding, I would still recommend to leave some amount of units back because Annie's way of conquering is like very committal. It's like Darius plus Cleave or Vi Ride the Wind. This means that like they're attacking him with so much might, you either have removal or you don't. The extra might that you're holding onto battlefields with usually isn't even worth it. You want to keep units in your base if you can. Assume that you cannot hold unless you have more than 10 might on a battlefield plus interaction. This is because they'll have things like Darius Gust, or Darius Fight or Flight, or Vi Ride the Wind, or, Kaisa Darius, like Accelerated Kaisa plus Darius. They can attack with so much might onto battlefields. So you need to have a ton of might onto the battlefield plus interaction if you want to stop them from being able to conquer. Generally, don't play to hold unless you have a point lead. It's really risky to try and hold because if you are down in points and they can like score to 7 and threaten to hold the other battlefields, it can be really risky if you don't have enough units left behind. If they have like if you're trying to hold onto a battlefield, say you're like at 6 and you're threatening to hold to 7 and they're at 6 and they play like sneaky deckhand, they can like play on top of the sneaky deckhand. So they'll like play sneaky deckhand onto the open battlefield, score to 7, and then place like Traveling Merchant, Pouty Pour on top. And they're holding with 6 might onto that battlefield. And 6 is like a pretty significant amount, especially spread across 3 bodies. It's difficult to actually get around that without having units left behind. So try not to hold unless you're threatening to hold to win. Last point, keep track of how many cards are in Annie's hand and trash. She only has so many options. If she's played 2 Gusts, like, don't play around the 3rd Gust. If she's played 2 Fighter Flights, like, don't play around the 3rd Fighter Flight. If she's played 3 Vi's, you don't need to worry about Vi Ride the Wind, right? So keep track. If Annie has like 2 cards in hand, you want to avoid Hidden Blading her units. If you can avoid it, don't Hidden Blade her units, because you don't want to allow her to draw into Vi Ride the Wind or something like that. So keep track, Annie only has so many answers in a deck. If you ever watch any players play and you like stand behind them and look at their hands, you'll see that like a lot of their hands are actually really really awkward. Especially like into the later game, their hands will be something like Traveling Merchant Darius, something like that. It's like super super awkward hands that aren't always going to be perfect. So you don't have to respect them too much if they're not holding that many cards in their hand. Quick discussion on the battlefield. So your battlefields are Valma's Lair, Arena's Greatest, and Trifarian War Camp. You generally want to be running Valma's Lair game one. You have a mainboarded Riptide Rex, so you want to get value out of that Riptide Rex. And since you're running fewer interactions, aka Hidden Blade and Facebreakers, since you're not running any Facebreakers in the main board, you need to get more value out of your you need to be able to guarantee value out of your Hidden Blades. This means that if one of the battlefields is Valma's Lair, then Vi Ride the Wind is not able to dodge Hidden Blade. Um, because Ride the Wind is action speed, so they would not even be able to like ride the wind out and flashback or something like crazy like that. Um, so you do want to be riding Valma's Lair game one. You're going first. Battlefield is Arena's Greatest. This matchup is losable, especially if they're getting a deckhand Gust opener. Like if they have deckhand and Gust in their opening hands, especially since this is going to be a game where they have 3 Gusts in their deck. This game is very losable. It's very losable. So you do need to be careful. But your going first game is the only time where it's safe to play the Arena's Greatest, unless you want like randomly play Arena's Greatest game one because they only have 1 Gust in their hand. But that one's like a little bit suspect. I would be worried about that if you lose the die roll. They're going first. You have Arena's Greatest on the battlefield. They play like Merchant turn 1 and then Merchant deckhands, like run Merchant into 1 and deckhand the other on turn 2. They go to 3 points. You can only clear 1 realistically. And then they'll hold to 4. And it's so easy turns 3 and 4 for Annie to score from 4 to 6. And then once they're at 6, you're like terrified for the rest of the game. So Arena's Greatest turn game 1 is really risky if you're not going first. So I would still recommend playing Valma's Lair game 1 and then Arena's Greatest when you're going first. And then going second, you'll just play War Camp. War Camp is like fine going second. It's your last battlefield. You have a better time holding on Trifarian War Camp. So even though you're not great at holding anyways, you can try and leverage it to try and hold. If you're holding, it means that Annie's scoring 1 less point. If you hold and stop them from going to 5 to 6, like that's really significant, and it can help you kind of squeeze out the tempo, or like squeeze out the victory, squeeze out like the point flip, because a lot of times it's going to be like they're at 4, you're at 3, they're at 5, you're at 4. If you can flip that and go like 5 to 5 or something, it's really good. Annie's battlefields. Annie's basically always running Zon Warren's Arena's Greatest Streaming Tree. Their game 1 is always going to be Zon Warren's because they have mainboarded scrap heaps, and then they sideboard out scrap heap for games 2 and 3. They're going first battlefield is always the Arena's Greatest. It's basically the same thing as what you're doing. And they're going second is always Streaming Tree. Game 1, Zon Warren's, you want to be discarding Consult the Past, Imperial Decree, and Grand Stratagem. Consult the Past is like the main thing that you want to be hitting. But Imperial Decree and Grand Stratagem just don't have as much relevance in this matchup. Yeah. And note that if you're conquering at 0 cards in hand, you get to draw for free. So just keep those in mind. Zon Warrens is like a pretty decent battlefield for you because you're running a lot of like weird bad cards in your deck. So if it's like turn 3, you're pretty happy discarding like Daring Poro. You're pretty happy discarding Trifarian Glory Seeker. Your random 2 and 3 drops that are not Vanguard Captain. You're pretty happy with this card. So before Annie was super strong, I was actually playing Zon Warrens in replacement for Valma's Lair. But Zon Warrens helps out Annie a little bit too much, so I replaced it with Valma's Lair. But like that means that, in my opinion, Zon Warrens is a perfectly reasonable battlefield for you to be able to utilize since you're kind of a aggressive list. Going first is Arena's Greatest. Try to leverage holding on Trifarian War Camp to stop Annie from winning as fast. I have a little typo in there that says you. I think I was gonna say just good luck. This game is very difficult. I think what I was trying to write is you have roughly like a 30% win rate on this on this battlefield. Like Arena's Greatest Trifarian War Camp game, where you're going second. Don't expect to win it. It's very, very difficult. Their going second game is gonna, or battlefield is gonna be Dreaming Tree. It's gonna be Arena's Greatest for you and Dreaming Tree for them. This is gonna be like games 2 or 3. There's like a couple notes for Dreaming Tree. Facebreaker and Call to Glory both draw. Call to Glory is obvious, but Facebreaker is like a little bit less obvious. If you're choosing your own unit, you will be able to draw from Dreaming Tree. It's not you're not allowed to play Facebreaker if your unit is the only unit on the battlefield, because it needs to be like the targeting conditions need to be met, and the targeting conditions for Facebreaker is one enemy unit and one ally unit. So you can only Facebreaker when they're attacking into you. But there are like some funky situations that come up, like you're like attacking into a battlefield, and then, or you're like on the battlefield, and then you're like attacking to the other battlefields, and then they ride the wind over to like contest your first battlefield. You can Facebreaker and like recall them back, and then get the draw off of it. So it's pretty nice. Hidden Blade draws 3. Don't get baited by the value unless you have to dig for cards. Hidden Blade's so valuable in your matchup. You can if you are like absolutely running out of cards, but I would recommend doing something like hide Hidden Blade at Dreaming Tree, and don't use it unless you're forced to. So if it's something like you have 0 cards in hand, or like 1 card in hand, and like your card in hand is like a Daring Pour or something, and they don't attack into your Dreaming Tree, like wait until your next turn to get the draw before you start popping your units, because you want to keep your Hidden Blade hidden for as long as you possibly can. Some sideboard options / ideas. So if you look at my video from a couple days ago, you already have 1 Noxian Drummer and 3 Facebreakers in your sideboard. So you're going to sub 1 Noxian Drummer for 1 Riptide Rex, because Riptide Rex gets blown out by Flash. And you're going to sub in 3 Facebreakers for your 2 Imperial Decrees and 1 Grand Stratagem. Imperial Decree and Grand Stratagem are not required to win in this matchup. Annie is incapable of holding regardless, so you don't need the extra stuff to be able to hold, to be able to attack him. The only real relevant use for Imperial Decree and Grand Stratagem game 1 is being able to hold slightly better. It'll be something like you have 4 units on a battlefield and then Grand Stratagem to hold, or you'll put 2 units on each battlefield and play Imperial Decree so that when Vi runs in, she dies. Potential other options in your sideboard. The only like real option is like Cruel Patron. Cruel Patron's like okay. It's okay. If you're getting Cruel Patron fight or flighted, it like kind of sucks. It's like kind of slow. If they're like Cruel Patron and they like ride the wind to the other battlefield, like that also sucks as well. So Cruel Patron is like a little bit on the slow side. So that's why I don't have it in my sideboard. But if you look at other Annie decks or other Viktor decks, they will have Cruel Patron in the sideboard, and it's for the Annie matchup. There are a couple spicy sideboard options. These are spicy because they kind of suck, but if you want to experiment with them, I welcome you to. One is Vanguard Attendant. Vanguard Attendant, I have 1 copy in the main already, and it's not being removed for the matchup. It's like just barely good enough. Just barely good enough. It attacks over all her 2-drops and deckhand and Kaisa, and it trades into Darius. It's okay. If it gets fight or flighted, you're pretty sad. It gets around like Void Seeker, and it gets around Gust, so like it has use. It's just a little bit scuffed. One that I've been trying to cook up a little bit is Set Kingpin. Set Kingpin, you don't have ways to buff him, and you don't want to be running him into battlefields with Trifarian Glory Seeker, Trifarian Glory Seeker. The idea with Set Kingpin is that he's just a 4-cost unit that has 5 might that doesn't need to use a sack of unit like Cruel Patron does. It fulfills basically the same role as Cruel Patron, because attacking in as a 5 is essentially the same thing as attacking in as a 6, but you get to keep your other body. And defending as a 5 versus defending as a 6 is like almost not relevant, because the way you're going to be dying is like Kaisa Cleave or Darius Cleave. And both 5 and 6 die to Cleave, because Kaisa goes to 7. So essentially 5 and 6 are the same thing. The only real difference is Set has a power cost and Cruel Patron has sacrifice cost. If you have a seal out on the battlefield set is just like objectively better than Cruel Patron. So it's an interesting sideboard option that I've been thinking about. But I don't think it's good enough. But I think it's good enough to experiment with. The last spicy sideboard option is Forge of the Future. This card sucks. I just think it's hilarious. There are relevant uses for this. It has a very similar feel to Soaring Scout or Watchful Sentry. It's a two drop that has 1 might. The only benefit for it is it's able to recycle cards from your opponent's trash, I think. It doesn't have a targeting restriction, so that's how I imagine it works out. So what you can do is any players are willing to discard Ride the Wind in the early game and then fetch it back with Annie. If they do that, you can recycle Ride the Wind, which you're pretty happy about. You can, if you're hitting 4 spells, you're pretty happy. It'll be something like, if you can hit like Ride the Wind, Gust, stack deck, or something like that, you're really, really, really happy about that. The other thing is it'll make Vi 4 might smaller. I had Forge of the Future. I had 2 of them in my sideboard. So like theoretically, like, okay, 4 might is like not relevant, but like 8 might is relevant. If you're able to play both Forge of the Futures and recycle 8 cards from Annie's trash, that is relevant. I will say that when I had Forge of the Future in my sideboard, I never cast it a single time. I think when I had it in my sideboard, I just didn't play against any Annies, and when I did play against Annie and sided it in, I just never drew them. So I think this idea probably sucks, but it's hilarious, and I would recommend you not to experiment with it. So this last few slides here are playing around certain cards and combos that Annie has. So first one that's really obvious is Vi Ride the Wind. So this is the main win condition for Annie to score from 6 to 8. Annie actually has a pretty difficult time scoring from 6 to 8 without Vi Ride the Wind. The best other way that they have is like Darius Accelerated Kaisa. The problem with that is it costs 10, which is very, very difficult for them. The other one is like Darius plus cleave whatever unit is existing on the battlefield. So if they have like a 2-drop on like in base, they'll like cleave the 2-drop and then Darius into the other battlefield. So they're attacking in with 5 in one battlefield and 7 in the other battlefield. So they'll send the 7 to the bigger battlefield and the 5 in the smaller battlefield. Otherwise, which is like slightly easier to play around because the way you play around that is like the same way you play around Vi Ride the Wind. And if you're able to keep their board clear, then they don't have that option. So the way you play around Vi Ride the Wind is hide cards, leave as much mana up as possible. You can hide Consult the Past. You can hide, like I've had games where I hide double Consult the Past and I leave mana up so that they are hesitant to run it if they have other alternatives. Like if they're at 6 and you're at 5, they will be willing sometimes to just develop to base and then wait 1 turn to be able to bait out your hidden cards. If they only have like 1 copy of Vi and 1 copy of Ride the Wind in their hands, they will be scared to run into you if you have both battlefields and are at 5 points. So even if you're hiding Consult the Past, try not to reveal them until you have to. Once you have to, just pop both Consult the Pasts and then try to dig for your answers. If they're committing to Vi Ride the Wind, then there's no point in keeping the second battlefield. The second hidden card on the other battlefield hidden. Just reveal it and try to dig for your answers. Try to save at least 1 Hidden Blade. If you have 2 Hidden Blades in hand, you can use 1 to draw or use 1 for tempo. Like that's fine. But like especially game 1 when you don't have access to Facebreaker, like try to keep 1 in your hand or hidden. But ideally in your hand because then you could play it at action speed for whenever Vi runs in. Yeah. Prevent Annie from getting 6 points. That's a nice one. If you can prevent Annie from getting 6 points, you can do whatever you want. You can you can spend all the Hidden Blades you want if you can stop them from getting 6 points. If you're holding Imperial Decree, especially like game 1 where you actually have Imperial Decree in your hands, but at least 2 units on 1 battlefield or 2 units on each battlefield is more preferable. But like if you're holding two units on one battlefield and they don't have any units on board, then putting two units is fine. The reason you put two is because you want to play around things like Gust and Fight or Flight. Vi Ride the Wind is such a cheap combo, it only takes 4 mana, that they still have mana up for a lot of interaction. You would want to put two units on each battlefield so that if they're like committing Vi Ride the Wind and playing like, and they have two pieces of interaction, like Gust, Fight or Flight, then at least one battlefield will be able to like hold with Imperial Decree and trade into something. If you're holding Grand Stratagem, you want to put at least 3 to 4 units on one battlefield. 3 units puts you to 18 might. 4 units puts you to 24 might. The reason you run like ideally 4 is because again you're playing around Gust or Fight or Flight. You cannot use Grand Stratagem in response to Gust. So that means if you're running at 4 units and they Gust or Fight or Flight 1 unit and then they run Vi in, Vi needs to go above 18 to be able to hit over that battlefield. If Vi is like getting over 2 units, aka like getting above 12 is pretty easy for Vi, but getting Vi above 18 is actually pretty difficult. So you want to be putting 4 units if you can afford it. Make sure you're still holding units in base though, unless you're up in points. Then you can hold with as many units as you want. Playing around Defensive Ride the Wind. So Defensive Ride the Wind is something like in the mid games, turns like 3 to 5, when like there are very few units on the board. Annies will try to cheese out extra points by playing Ride the Wind from one battlefield to the other to score points on your turn. What you'll want to do is, okay, generally this Ride the Wind is going to be on 2 might units or Annie. That's generally, they're not really going to be able to do this on Kaisa because they're not going to have enough mana up. Usually they're accelerator hitting Kaisa, so Kaisa's going to be spending 5, and he's usually aren't going to, well, I guess they could, because they're always going to have 2 mana up, but it's kind of sketchy for them to do it. But anyways, usually it's going to be 2 or 3 might units that are going to be getting Ride the Winded into around battlefields. The way you play around it, or the way that I've found is most consistent playing around it, is you first run, so it's going to be like one empty battlefield and one battlefield that they are holding a unit on that they want to Ride the Wind to the other battlefield. What you do is you first run into the battlefield that has no units onto it, and you want to run into it with a total might that is equal to or greater than the unit that they're threatening Ride the Wind with. So typically this will be a 2 might unit, so you want to run 2 might onto the empty battlefield. This means that if they Ride the Wind in response to you going there, you'll be able to trade, which you're happy with, which they're not going to do, obviously. Otherwise, they'll be forced to let you score the point. Then what you do is you run onto the other battlefield so that they can't Ride the Wind over, or else they'll die. If they're holding mana up, they're holding like 3 mana up, they can like Ride the Wind cleave, but that's when you can like Facebreaker or something. You want to be running these units into the battlefields before you play other cards during your turn, so that you can hold mana for Facebreaker or Hidden Blade or Call to Glory if you have to, and then you can play your units afterwards. So that's generally the way that you're going to be playing around Defensive Ride the Wind. Note that if they are the attacker, you can Facebreaker to recall them to base. But if you're running in and they Ride the Wind in response, they're going to be the defender. So if you Facebreaker, you're going to get recalled to base, and then they're going to score the point. So keep track of who's the attacker and who's the defender. Playing around Sneaky Deckhand. So beyond turns 1 and 2, when you can't play around Sneaky Deckhands, you're going to have options to try to play around Sneaky Deckhand. Any players will have some number of Sneaky Deckhands in their hand. They're not like you aren't able to like opt in like out of drawing Sneaky Deckhand. They're gonna have some number of Sneaky Deckhands. So you don't want to allow them to steal points from you by playing Sneaky Deckhands onto open battlefields. You want to have at least one unit onto the battlefield so that they're not open. So you can't play Sneaky Deckhand into them. If you cannot do that, you want to at least have 2 might in your base. If you're not able to go into an empty battlefield, so that if they do play Sneaky Deckhand on top of it, you can run your units into it to trade or go over it. If they have a lot of cards in hand, you want to have 2 or more units on each battlefield, because if you only have 1, they can like Gust or Fight or Flight the 1 unit and then play Sneaky Deckhand on top of it. which is not something you want. So if you have like one recruit on one battlefield, one recruit on the other battlefield, they can do some crazy stuff like gust recruit, play sneaky deckhand, ride the wind, score 2, run sneaky deckhand back home because it's going to be readied. And that is not something you want to be dealing with. So if you have 2 units on each battlefield, it stops a lot of the sneaky deckhand shenanigans. Unless they want to play like gust plus fighter flight, or like 2 gusts plus sneaky deckhand, and at that point they're using so many cards, you're probably going to win that game anyways. Playing around Gust and Fighter Flight. So when hiding cards for defensive use, aka Facebreaker or Hidden Blade, make sure to have multiple units at the battlefield to ensure your units aren't getting blown off the battlefield to force early hidden card usage. They're going to do stuff like this. If you have one recruit on a battlefield and Consult the Past, they're going to Gust your unit. They're going to Fighter Flight your unit because they want to get rid of your Hidden Blades or your Facebreakers. So if you're only able to hold onto a battlefield with one unit, only hide Consult the Past. Only hide Consult the Past. Or Hidden Blade if if you're like committed to drawing cards with it. If you really want to use these hidden cards for defensive use, you want to have at least 2 units, but like ideally 3 units onto the battlefields that you're hiding these cards for defensive use for. If your opponent is not at 6 points, you can hold your defensive cards in your hand to ensure they're not fizzling. You're generally going to end your turns with open mana anyways, so if you have one unit onto the battlefields, you don't want to be hiding Hidden Blade. You want to be holding Hidden Blade in your hands, so that if they're gusting your unit, you're not forced to Hidden Blade your own unit. Instead, you can wait until they run onto the battlefield and then Hidden Blade them then. Fighter Flight is action speed if not hidden. So it cannot be used to deny your Noxian Drummer trigger. So somebody mentioned in the previous video that Gust can stop your Noxian Drummer trigger, but Fighter Flight cannot if it's not being hidden, which any players are not going to hide Fighter Flight. It also cannot be used to dodge your Riptide Rex trigger. It can't, like Flash can be used because it's reaction speed, but if they've used like a couple flashes already, you can pretty safely use Riptide Rex to snipe cards that are on battlefields. Make sure that you're keeping an eye out for your opponents who are attempting to Fighter Flight like illegally. Like you don't want to be rule sharking, but obviously like if they're doing an illegal action, like make sure you're keeping an eye out for it. Just note that Fighter Flight is action speed if it's not hidden. Oh my god. Yeah, so that's it. I hope you guys learned something. I just talked for an hour straight, so it's pretty difficult. I hope it was helpful. I plan on doing a Viktor card alternative analysis. I'd like to talk about the SGCon 4th place Viktor list. I want to do a Kaisa matchup video just like this one, and then a Viktor like gameplay loop tips and tricks for Viktor video as well. So I've got a lot of like ideas. Let me know which ones you guys are kind of looking forward to or want to see come out a little bit earlier, because I'm flexible in like which order I'm releasing these videos in. And leave a comment if you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, share it if you got some Viktor buddies that are trying to learn. Yeah, thanks for watching.